Alright, so here's the problem. We have a frost-free spigot. Now, every time you turn this frost-free spigot on, the spigot fills a standpipe with water, comes out. When you shut it off, this long brass rod, all the way down at the bottom, of varying lengths of pipe. And that's interesting. It turns off at the bottom. So we'll see if we can go down here and the light will adjust. Now this pipe on the outside and this flange that you see, let me focus. This flange I installed, and this is like a little, just a little well pit. I installed this flange with masonry screws and put a 1.25 inch, 18-inch riser up and drilled and tapped holes to hold the inner pipe, which goes down, passes through, and this is the actual pipe that fills with water. And it goes far enough down here into the well pit where it will not freeze. And this is the actual unit itself. So this is the line that feeds off of the weep hole. And it actually fell out, but I have it currently going into a 5-gallon bucket. This is an old overflow pipe right here that doesn't drain. But, sorry. So this bucket I used to measure the amount of water that drains out of this 4-foot standpipe. Now this isn't into the ground, so I can do two things. I can go directly from the pressure tank out through, and then when it comes back down, I could have it go into a closed system that has a switch in it that will boost the pressure and refill at whatever PSI I decide back into the pressure tank here. And it'll kick on only, it'll pump only when the float switch actuates in the bucket or closed system, closed tank. Or, conversely, I set up a system, and that would be problematic because that would require our drinking water this could potentially be our drinking water to get some kind of contamination if dirt or debris or something got into that tank. So it kind of, you would have to have air exchange in there or just another diaphragm. A diaphragmic tank down here. Too complex for what I need. So the plan is to run it into a larger bucket. A salt reservoir from an old water softener will work just fine. And have a sump pump with the float switch. And then when it fills up, and it will be about this tall and about that big. So quite a few gallons. It'll take quite a few cycles of turning the spigot on and off before the barrel fills to the point where the submersible pump is actuated. Once the submersible pump is actuated, it's merely a process of pumping it up and out. That's pretty interesting. Little microclimate when I put that, take a picture of that, when I put that piece of glass over there. Over the roof, but over the opening. But yeah, have it just pump directly out. Somewhere in the corner right here, have a pipe that comes out on the other side. Then pipe it out directly into the garden. Have it go up about 5 feet, 4 feet, and then go down into the garden and fill the duck pond. And during the winter time, We still utilize the ducks in the garden. However, we use a smaller pond. We don't use the kiddie pool. The kid pool needs to be dumped, cleaned out, and removed, but you can see right now, this is after a couple hours. It was full, and within a couple hours they got it dirty, muddy, and it needs to be dumped tonight before it freezes. But this gives me the option of moving it around. And the benefit of ducks in the garden, that is something else I will be talking about throughout the course of this winter. And this garden in general has been an ongoing experiment for the last 5 years. And right now I have kennel panels getting ready to fence in the shorter parts so that the goats can be penned in here throughout the majority of the winter and have a temporary house. I'm going to fabricate a temporary house out of hardwood pallets, and that house is just for the ducks to go into. They love old dog houses. And eventually this garden will be loaded with enough nitrogen that come spring I won't have the issue I did last year with a nutrient deficiency. I added too many wood chips, didn't run the ducks, goats, or any kind of manuring animal, and fed the garden with a large amount of wood chips. And what happened was everything kind of went stagnant. I had to use a lot of compost tea. And that's the main downfall of the back to Eden or the wood chip gardening, is that you have to have nitrogen producers constantly feeding your wood chips as they break down, because it almost has pulses and waves with the seasons. During the winter, if you dug down here, there are still worms, there are still microbes doing their thing, albeit quite slowly, but they're still doing it. And these were the pepper stakes. These held the peppers. Just scrap pieces of rebar. And then this is my makeshift sprinkler tower. This watered the garden quite well. And yeah. So more to come, but that's just a quick video on what's happening with the frost-free spigot and why so many people are dumping gallons of water year-round, because when people install one of these, they utilize it year-round. It's an active year-round utilization. So for me, I can't justify putting 2.5 gallons of water, roughly, every time I turn the spigot on and off, and just letting it drain the standpipe every time and drain into the ground. If you totaled up the wattage of power every year based upon turning it off, an average of on and off, cycling it 3 times a day, I mean, that would make up for, I do it at least twice during the winter. Not to mention during the summer, I would be constantly doing it. So one other option is to just leave the switch on and then have a valve in the summertime. But that would mitigate a lot of the ons and offs. So basically, once summertime arises, you just leave the main valve on all the time, which I did most of the end. I put this in halfway through the summer, and it stayed on. I had to do a little bit of Teflon taping down in the bottom because of leaks, but it worked out quite well. It's worked out. There have been issues with leaking. I have to wait for it to dry out before I can see, but the excess moisture has formed some really cool algae growth on the inside of the glass. And yes, I know, probably should replace that with something a little more solid, but it allowed me to look in until it got dirty. It allowed me to look in and see what was going on with the water level every time. So for troubleshooting, it was awesome, but yes, moving forward, setting up a method of pumping out the water when the large holding tank gets full, have it pump up and then down into the garden, so it just drains into the garden so that the garden gets even more water than it already does. Pardon the mess in the background. You do not see that, but you do. So anyways, lots to do. Thanks for watching.